Welcome. This is Chapter 6, the Constitution and the New Republic. So in Chapter 5, we left off on the Articles of Confederation, and we realized that they were not working. They were not effective. They were not strong enough. They had no real power. So the Founding Fathers and the Constitutional Convention decided to form a completely new government. Many Americans advocated for a new, stronger central government. And this was evident in many instances. For example, the Newburgh Conspiracy, where a bunch of military people were upset that they were not getting paid, so they tried to stage a coup to kind of overthrow the Continental Congress and get their money back. But thanks to George Washington up here, they were able to subdue them and kind of like keep on this plan of forming a new government. Washington helped prevent the rebellion, so major leader. The major weaknesses of the Articles was the lack of ability to tax. Without money, you can't do much. We have the Annapolis Convention in 1786, where we know that we need a new government. We just need a commitment for people wanting to change that government. So in the Annapolis Convention, Alexander Hamilton, this guy right here at the bottom, gained the promise to meet the following year in Philadelphia to kind of talk about this new form of government. The Articles are not working. In the Annapolis Convention, he got a promise from most states, most of the 13 states, to go to Philadelphia and come up with the new constitution. So it was baby steps. And this was even more evident in Shays' Rebellion, that helped people demand a more stronger central government. Because if you remember, Shays' Rebellion was when a bunch of farmers were upset about the rising taxes, so they were able to take on the government by themselves, showing the weakness of the Articles. In the Constitutional Convention, very, very important. Remember, this is revolutionary during this time. This is a time of kings and queens and tyrants. So having a democracy on the Constitutional Convention, everything that was happening here was completely radical. We have 55 delegates from 12 states. Delegates are people that the state sends to represent them, except Rhode Island. Rhode Island didn't go because they were upset about the issue of slavery and the power of the federal government, among other reasons. Some of the key players were George Washington, who was a hero during the Revolutionary War and a great leader that stopped the Newport Conspiracy. So he was president of the convention. We have Edmund Randolph from Virginia. He proposed the three branches that we have today, so very revolutionary thoughts. We have the issue of representation, where one of the major issues was power. How is power going to be divided? And power is dependent on representation. We have the Virginia Plan. Under the Articles of Confederation, representation was everybody's equal. Every state, no matter how big or small, gets one vote. So in Virginia, the Virginia Plan under James Madison, what he proposed was legislative based on representation. Obviously, that didn't work for the Articles of Confederation, so we need to change that up. So if we have legislatures based on representation, power based on the number of people in your state, that's better. And Virginia is a big state, so they have more people, therefore they should have more power. That was the Virginia Plan. The New Jersey Plan, proposed by William Patterson. If you know, New Jersey is a little bit smaller than Virginia. They kind of followed the Articles of Confederation path, where each state was having equal representation. This was basically a battle between big states and little states. Who was supposed to have the power? They couldn't come up with the compromise. There was a lot of debate. There was a threat to end the convention altogether until we have Roger Sherman come from Connecticut and come up with the brilliant plan called the Great Compromise. This is something very, very impressive and revolutionary during this time. In the Great Compromise, the Connecticut plan, we have a bicameral legislature. What do I mean by bicameral? Bi means two. So basically 2 houses of Congress. We have a lower house, the House of Reps, which would be based on population, just like the Virginia plan. And we have the upper house, the Senate, which would have 2 representations per state, the New Jersey plan. So we combine the best of both plans and made them into one through the Great Compromise. Very, very revolutionary and political savvy situation. Senators were to be elected by the state legislatures. This did not change until the popular vote until the 17th Amendment. We're going to learn about that later on. So other compromises. We have the 3/5 compromise. Just like Rhode Island did not attend the Constitutional Convention in the beginning because of the issue of slavery, slavery was a big thing, and we had to make a compromise. The North, which was did not like slavery like the South did, they had to make up a compromise to get the South to come to the table and negotiate. So we had the 3-5 compromise. What was the 3-5 compromise? It was a horrible act, but something that was a necessary evil that had to happen in the issue of slaves. It basically meant that slaves would be counted towards 3/5 of a person when determining population in the house. So remember, we have a bicameral legislature that's based on the number of people in your house. We have a bunch of slaves in the South, so what the South wanted is for them to count. They couldn't vote, they didn't have any rights, they were not even considered people, but we want them to count. They wanted their cake and they wanted to eat it too. So the Great Compromise, in order to keep the South in the conversation, the North seceded in allowing the 3/5 compromise, which basically means, again, that slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person. No other rights, but they would be counted as part of the representation. We have the Slave Trade Compromise, where slaves imported could not be stopped prior to 1802. So all those slaves that were here already before 1808, that means that slavery, we could still trade slaves within we can't accept any more slaves because most of Europe kind of stopped the slave trade, but we didn't want to in the United States. But what we did is that we were still able to trade slaves within the United States prior to 1808. No, we can't get any more slaves after 1808, but we could still trade within the states. We have the Commerce Compromise, where Congress could tax imports or tariffs, but not exports. Basically anything coming into the country from France or England or anything, imports, we could tax, but we could sell our product, our American product, to other countries without having to pay. We have sovereignty, the issue of sovereignty, so rule. So where does it lie? Who has the ultimate power? Sovereignty is who is a sovereign, who has the ultimate power. We have this is what I mean about the Constitutional Convention being like no other during the time. It was so revolutionary. Because during this time, most of the power lay with the king or with the tyrant or with the military in almost every country in the world during this time. But James Madison, one of our founding fathers, came up with this brilliant idea that power didn't lie with the king or a president or the Congress. Power laid with the people. The people choose the representatives. The people choose the president. The people choose our leaders. So therefore, power lay with the people. This was something that never happened. This was so revolutionary. I can't say that enough. We have the Supremacy Clause, where the Constitution would be the supreme law of the land, unlike the Articles of Confederation, where the states could pass their own laws and pretty much do whatever they wanted. The Supremacy Clause basically said, no, the Constitution, which we're creating right now in the Constitutional Convention, would be the supreme law of the land. It has the final say. No state could pass a law against the Constitution. No state can pass a law saying there is no freedom of speech, because it's in the Constitution, for example. Supremacy Clause. And the reason that the United States has the oldest government in the world today is because it's a living, breathing document. The reason that it's a living, breathing document is because of the necessary and proper clause, the elasticity of it. Just like a rubber band that could extend, that could move big or small, it's elastic, it's moving. That is why the Constitution has been able to survive so many years. Because, for example, today, the Founding Fathers had no idea that there could be anything like the Internet. They had no idea that the Internet existed. But because of the necessary and proper laws, Congress today can pass laws regarding the Internet. They pass basically their laws that Congress can make laws that are necessary and proper. So that makes the Constitution a living, breathing document. It's not something that never changes. It's something that could always be changed, that is based on necessity and during those times. So that's what makes it a living document. During this time, during the Constitutional Convention, so that's the structure of the Constitution, the basics, we have two kind of groups rising. We have the Federalists and we have the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists are those that, it's a political party, those that favor a strong central government and the Constitution. They tend to be from the North, and they favored a stronger central government. They knew that the Articles were not working. It was led by Alexander Hamilton, and they wanted a strong central government so that we could thrive. On the other side, we have the Anti-Federalists. those that favored a weaker central government and were wary of the Constitution. We already fought a revolution against a strong central government and a king. We don't want to go back to that. We want protections for our people, for our states. This was led by Thomas Jefferson. During these times, these two groups were trying to gain support for their side. So they were both trying to influence the American people on what to do. So we have the Federalist Papers, written by Alexander Hamilton and James Madison and John Jay. The purpose was to gain support for the ratification of the Constitution. Ratification means to support. What the Anti-Federalists wanted is the Bill of Rights. And it was added after the Constitution was ratified. So basically, the Federalists said, hey, Anti-Federalists, we will add a Bill of Rights if you guys adopt the Constitution, if you guys ratify it and approve it. And they agreed. So the Federalists promised to add them to gain support for the Anti-Federalists. And last but not least, Washington was unanimously elected president, our first president without a political party. We have the Judiciary Act of 1789. It created the Supreme Court with 1 Chief Justice and 5 Associate Justices. In the Constitution, there's no limit on how many Supreme Court justices there could be. And we're going to learn about this when we get to Roosevelt and him trying to pack the court. There was a creation of the executive department, the cabinet of the president. It was part of the unwritten Constitution, which basically means nowhere in the Constitution it says that the executive branch, the president, has to have a cabinet, but most presidents do. It are the heads, and it appoints heads, and it is appointed by the president, appointed by the president, and approved by the Senate. We have the Secretary of State, which is Thomas Jefferson, which deals with other countries. We have the Secretary of Treasury, which deals with money, which was led by Alexander Hamilton. We have the Secretary of War, which was led by Henry Knox, a major general in the Revolution. And throughout Washington's first term, Jefferson and Hamilton battled over the government's royal philosophy. So Jefferson and Hamilton were not friends. One was a Federalist, one was an Anti-Federalist, or a Democratic Republican. They were not friends. They were always battling about what the role of government should be. We have the Federalists and the Republicans. Like I said, there's a competition between these two sides. The Federalists was a political party, just led by Alexander Hamilton. It favored a strong central government, and they were responsible for ratifying the Constitution. It was mostly supported by the wealthy and the merchants. And something that they proposed was Hamilton's financial plan, where the federal government would assume state debts. What does that mean? It basically means that if Virginia can't borrow money from France or Britain, but everything that they owed already to other people, to other countries, to like the people themselves, the government would take on their debt so that they wouldn't have to bear it themselves. This gave more power to the federal government. It created the Bank of the United States, or also known as BUS. We're going to learn about this definitely when we get to Andrew Jackson. Hamilton's loose interpretation of the Constitution. This was possible to create the BUS through the elastic clause. Remember what I talked about. You have the excise tax. It was a tax on manufacturing goods like whiskey. So it started taxing many goods like whiskey that was brought in from other countries. It was it taxed imported goods, so anything coming from other countries was going to be taxed. And Jefferson and his supporters, the Republicans, Jefferson's party was the Republicans, the Democratic Republicans, agreed to plan when the capital was moved to the South. So we're going to accept all of this from the Federalists, even though I'm Democratic Republican, if we move the capital to the South, which is why the White House today is located in D.C., which is closer to Virginia in the South. They're the Republican Party, or the Democratic Republicans. That's the name of their party. It was led by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. They believed that the farmers were the backbones of the economy. They were pro-French, so during this time, if you guys remember last year, the French Revolution is happening. So they were pro-French. The French Revolution was happening during this time, and we were in a bundle. Should we support them? Should we help them out? I mean, they helped us during our revolution. Should we reciprocate? So Republicans supported the revolution. Federalists were horrified by the horrors of the revolution. So the Federalists were like, nah, we just fought a revolution. We're not trying to get into another war. If we get into every single battle, when are we going to be in peace? That was their idea. So again, there was a disagreement. You have the establishment of the national sovereignty, which was the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. Remember, we are now able to tax. People don't like taxes. So there was a Whiskey Rebellion. In response to the excess tax on whiskey, many Americans started to revolt or kind of do a revolution, a rebellion, just like Shays' Rebellion. Washington summoned the state militia, and the rebellion was quickly stopped. It demonstrated the power of the new government. So unlike Shays' Rebellion, we were able to hold it down, showing that the new constitution was working.